Let me tell you about a small wooden box that sits in the home of nearly every Jewish family I know. It is not a safe. There is no lock on it worth breaking. A thief who found it would laugh and walk past, and yet that box, or some version of it, has protected more wealth across 30 generations than any bank, any vault, any clever tax structure you have ever read about. I want to be precise tonight, because the title I gave this video can be misread. This is not a charm. It is not luck folded into an envelope. There is nothing mystical buried in the wood. What sits in that box is a rule, and the rule is older than the Roman Empire. Mayer Amschel Rothschild, the man who founded the most powerful banking dynasty in modern history, kept this discipline in Frankfurt in the 1700s. His ledgers, documented by the historian Niall Ferguson, show it plainly. A fixed portion of the house was set aside before the family spent on itself, before the mansions, before the bonds, before the loans to kings. First the cut, so here is my promise. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what to place where you keep your money, the precise rule that governs it, and why money that obeys this rule does not leak the way yours does right now. And I will tell you the one verse that started all of it, the verse a shepherd whispered in the desert 4,000 years ago that every wealthy Jewish household still obeys today. Stay with me, because most people get the order of this completely backwards, and the order is the entire secret. Let me start with the problem, because you already feel it. Money comes in, you can name the number, and then somehow, by the end of the month, it is gone, and you cannot fully account for where. You earned more this year than 5 years ago. Are you 5 years richer? Be honest with yourself. For most people, the answer is no, or barely, and they do not understand why. They blame the economy. They blame prices. They blame the boss who underpays them. I am not going to insult you with that. The truth is colder and far more useful. Money does not leave you in one big dramatic exit. It leaks. A little here, a subscription there, a dinner, an upgrade you did not need. None of it feels like a decision. That is the trap. Wealth is not destroyed by the large choices you agonize over. It is bled out by the 1,000 small choices you never even register as choices. And the reason you never register them is that you have no fixed point. Nothing in your financial life is decided in advance. Everything is up for negotiation in the moment, and in the moment you almost always lose. You spend first, and you give, save, or invest from whatever survives, from the leftovers. And let me ask you something. When did the leftovers ever amount to anything? Have you ever once in your entire life gotten rich on what was left at the end? Now let me show you the rule the wealthy families understood, and I want to take you back to where it begins, because it does not begin in a bank. It begins with a frightened young man sleeping on a stone. The book of Genesis, chapter 28. Jacob is running for his life. His brother wants to kill him. He has nothing but the clothes on his back and a stone for a pillow, and in the night he has a dream, the famous ladder reaching to heaven. When he wakes, he does something that should stop you cold given his situation. He owns nothing. He is a fugitive, and he makes a vow. He says, "Of all that you give me, I will surely give 1/10 back." Read it yourself. Genesis 28, verse 22. A man with nothing commits the first 1/10 of everything he does not yet have. He decides the rule before there is a single coin to apply it to. That is the whole thing. That is the box. He set the cut before the wealth existed, so that when the wealth came, the wealth never owned him. He owned it. This is the discipline the tradition calls maaser. Maaser simply means 1/10, a tithe. The Torah commands it directly. Open Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verse 9. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the firstfruits of all your produce. Listen to that word, firstfruits, not the leftovers, not what remains after you have taken your share, and the world has taken its share, and the bills have taken theirs. The first slice off the top, before anything else touches the money. The ancient farmer did not harvest his field, sell the crop, pay his costs, feed his family, and then, if something happened to remain, bring a little offering. No, the first sheaf that came out of the ground was already not his. It was set aside the instant it existed. The rule lived before the harvest, not after it. Why does this matter for you, sitting there with a bank app and a salary instead of a field of wheat? Because the mechanism is identical, and the mechanism is the only thing that has ever worked. When the first portion is removed before you make a single decision, you are no longer negotiating with yourself every day. The most expensive negotiation in your life is the one you have with yourself 100 times a month, and you lose it because you are tired, or you want the thing, or it is just this once. Maaser ends that negotiation before it starts. The first 10% is gone the moment the money arrives. It was never yours to spend, the same way the first sheaf was never the farmer's to sell. And here is what nobody tells you, the part that turns a religious practice into a wealth engine. The discipline of cutting first does not stay in its lane. A man who has trained himself to remove the first tenth before he touches a cent has built a muscle, and that muscle lifts far more than the tithe. It lifts the savings, it lifts the investment. The hand that learned to set aside the first portion for giving is the same hand that learns to set aside the second portion for owning. You cannot leak when the top has already been cut. The box, the separated portion, is not the destination of your wealth. It is the gatekeeper that proves, every single time you open your wallet, that the first slice was never yours to keep. Let me put the modern evidence on the table, because I do not want you to think this is a sermon dressed up as finance. Go back to the Rothschilds. Niall Ferguson, in his definitive history of that family, documents a giving discipline so consistent, it reads almost like an accounting entry rather than a charitable mood. They did not give because they felt generous in a good quarter. They gave because the portion was already allocated. Structurally, before the question of feeling ever arose, the giving was not downstream of the profit. It sat upstream of the entire household budget, and that same family a compounded capital across more than 2 centuries, through wars, through revolutions, through the collapse of governments that owed them money. Coincidence? I have studied wealth for a long time, and I have learned to distrust the word coincidence when the same pattern shows up in family after family across centuries. Take Jacob Schiff, the great American Jewish financier who ran Kuhn, Loeb and Company and helped build the railroads that stitched a continent together. His biographers, including the work drawn on by Stephen Birmingham in his account of that world, record that Schiff gave away a fixed and substantial share of his income with the regularity of a clock, year after year, in good markets and bad, not as an afterthought, as a line item. The portion was decided first. His wealth was disciplined by a rule he did not renegotiate every December, based on how the year had gone. And what happened to the houses that lived this way? They did not flame out in a single generation the way lottery fortunes and tech windfalls so often do. They endured. They became the thing every striver dreams of and almost no one achieves. They became old money, generational wealth, the kind that outlives the man who made it. Now I want to be honest with you about something, because honesty is the only thing of mine worth having. You might be thinking, fine, but giving money away makes me poorer, not richer. That is arithmetic, and it feels airtight. 10% out is 10% less. How can subtracting build wealth? Let me answer that directly, with no mysticism, because I told you at the start I would not sell you a charm. The wealth does not come from the giving in some magical return on blessing sense. I am not promising you that the universe wires the money back with interest. I am telling you something more reliable than a miracle. The wealth comes from the order. The act of cutting the first portion forces you to confront, every time money moves, that not all of it is yours to consume. It installs a ceiling on your own appetite that you did not have before. The man who tithes first cannot also pretend the whole paycheck is spendable, because the very first thing that happens to that paycheck is a subtraction he chose in advance. And a person who has accepted one non-negotiable subtraction off the top finds the second one easy: the retirement contribution, the investment account, the emergency fund. They all become the same motion, the same trained reflex of first the cut, then the living. That is why the giving makes you richer. Not because heaven pays a dividend, because the discipline that governs the dime governs the dollar. Think about what that actually does over a lifetime. The man who never learns to cut first will, across 40 working years, leak a fortune in increments he never noticed, and arrive at the end with a number that bears no relation to what passed through his hands. The man who cut first, the same income exactly, the same salary, arrives somewhere entirely different, because the leaks were sealed at the source. Same water, one bucket had a hole, one did not. Nothing about their earning explains the gap between them, only the rule does. There is an even older layer to this, written into the laws of property, and I want you to have it. The Talmud, in tractate Bava Batra, deals at length with the ordering of accounts, the dividing of property, the careful keeping of boundaries between what is yours and what is another's. The whole instinct of that tractate is that wealth held without clear order is wealth at risk. Money that is not separated, not assigned, not bounded, becomes a swamp where nothing can be tracked and everything slowly disappears. The sages understood 2,000 years ago what every honest financial planner will tell you today. Unassigned money vanishes. Money with a name on it survives. The first portion cut and set apart is the first act of putting a name on your money, of refusing to let it dissolve into the undifferentiated pile that leaks away. You are not just giving when you make that cut. You are declaring that your money has an order, and order is the thing that protects it. Let me bring in another figure from the book of Genesis, because the pattern of the wise first cut runs through the whole story. Joseph, Genesis chapter 41. Pharaoh dreams of 7 fat cows and 7 lean ones, 7 full ears of grain and 7 withered, and Joseph reads it. 7 years of plenty, then 7 years of famine. And what does Joseph do with that knowledge? He does not wait to see how good the good years feel. He institutes a rule immediately. In the 7 years of abundance, a fixed portion of all the grain is taken first and stored, before Egypt eats its fill, before anyone enjoys the surplus. A 5th set aside off the top every year, no exceptions, while the granaries fill. And when the famine came, and it came exactly as he said, Egypt was the only kingdom standing. Nations came to Joseph to buy bread. He had not predicted the future with magic. He had simply taken the first cut during the years of plenty, when it was easy to believe the plenty would last forever. That is the entire lesson of your wealth in one ancient story. The good years are when you cut, not the bad ones. By the time the famine arrives, the decision is already made or already lost. And there is one more figure I have to give you, the first one, the man who started the whole line, Abraham. Genesis chapter 23. His wife Sarah has died, and he needs to bury her, and he is a stranger in the land with no plot of ground to call his own. What does he do? He could have taken the cave he was offered for free. The text says the offer was made to him plainly. Take it, it is yours, bury your dead. And he refuses the gift. He insists on buying the field, on paying the full price, 400 shekels of silver. And the verse records that he weighed out the silver, weighed it, in the currency accepted by the merchants. Why does the Torah bother to tell us he weighed it? Because this is the first recorded property transaction in the lineage, and it is done with order, measured, counted, boundaries drawn, price named, nothing left vague. Abraham would not let the most important purchase of his life dissolve into a favor, an arrangement, a fuzzy understanding that could be undone later. He put a number on it. He set the order. That instinct, the refusal to let wealth move without a clear and measured rule, is the same instinct that puts the first cut in the box. It runs from Abraham weighing silver over a grave to the Rothschilds allocating their portion before the household ate. The same blood, the same discipline. Order first always, even in grief. This is the layer the sages built into law, and I want to give you the folio so you can find it yourself. Bava Batra, page 21, and the pages around it, deals with boundaries, with the proper keeping of records, with how a man must order what is his, so that it cannot be quietly eaten by what is not. The tractate spends its strength on partitions, on walls between properties, on the writing down of who owns what. And underneath all of it is a single conviction that 2,000 years has not aged a day. Wealth that is not bounded is wealth that disappears. The man who keeps no line between the portion he may spend and the portion he may not has already begun to lose, because money with no boundary flows toward whatever feels good in the moment. The first cut is a wall. It is the first partition you build inside your own income. And the sages knew, long before anyone had a spreadsheet, that the partition is what saves the estate. So let me ask you the question I have been circling this whole time. What would change if you stopped giving, saving, and investing from the leftovers and started cutting from the first fruits? What would your life look like in 10 years if the very first thing that happened to every dollar that entered your hands was a rule you set in advance instead of a feeling you negotiated in the moment? Because that is the only difference between the families that hold wealth for 300 years and the people who earn a fortune and watch it evaporate. It is not income. The lottery winners had income. It is not luck. It is not even intelligence. It is the order of operations. First the cut, then the life, and nearly everyone alive has it exactly backwards. Now let me make this concrete, because I promised you the actual practice, not just the theory, and a principle you cannot act on tonight is worthless. Here is what to place where you keep your money. Take a small container, a box, an envelope, a separate account in your banking app. It does not matter which, only that it is separate and that it lives in the same place your money lives. So you confront it constantly. Into that container goes the first portion, removed before you spend a single cent of new income. The traditional measure is a 10th maaser. If a 10th frightens you because your numbers are tight, then begin with less, but begin, and make it the first transaction, never the last. The rule that governs the box is one sentence, and I want you to say it out loud. The first slice was never mine to keep. That sentence is the whole inheritance. Every time you open your wallet, every time you pay for something, that separated portion sitting beside your money reminds you that you already drew a line, that not all of this was ever yours to consume. The box is not where your wealth goes to disappear. It is the gatekeeper standing at the front of every dollar, and a man with a gatekeeper does not leak. And once that first cut becomes automatic, once you no longer feel it, you add the second motion. The same hand, the same reflex now sets aside a portion for owning, for investing, for the future version of you who will need what the present version refuses to waste. The discipline transfers. That is the part no one believes until they have lived it. The muscle you build tithing the first 10 is the exact muscle that builds the rest of your wealth, because both are the same act. Cut first, live second. The families who have done this for 30 generations did not have a secret stock tip. They had an order of operations, and they refused to break it. In fat years and lean years, in Frankfurt and in New York, for 300 years and more. Let me recap, because I want you to carry this out of here whole. The problem is that your money leaks, not through big decisions, but through 1,000 small ones you never recognize as decisions, because you have no fixed point and you spend first and give from the leftovers. The rule 4,000 years old is the first fruits. Mishlei 3, verse 9, Honor the Lord with the first of your produce. Jacob's vow in Genesis 28, the first tenth committed before he owned a thing. Joseph in Genesis 41. The first portion stored during the years of plenty, which is the only reason a nation survived the famine. And the mechanism, stripped of all mystery, is that cutting the first portion ends the daily negotiation with yourself, installs a ceiling on your appetite, and trains the exact muscle that builds every other form of wealth. It is not a charm. It is not luck in an envelope. It is a discipline that has compounded for 30 generations, and you can begin it tonight. So here is your action this week. One concrete thing, the way I always leave you with one concrete thing. Before your next dollar of income arrives, open your banking app or take out a real box if you are a person who needs to touch it, and create the separate place. The moment money comes in, move the first portion into it. Make it the first transaction, before rent, before food, before anything. A tenth if you can, less if you must. But first, always first. And then watch what it does to the rest of your spending, the way a single fixed point changes everything around it. That is the experiment. Run it for 90 days and tell me your money still leaks the way it does now. If something in this spoke to you, if you felt the click of a thing that is actually true, subscribe, because every week I take the oldest financial laws ever written down and I hand them to you the way they were handed to me, without the fluff and without the fear. These principles built dynasties. You just got them for free. And next time, I am going to show you the law the Talmud lays down about debt. The rule in Bava Batra that the wealthiest lenders in history followed without exception. The one that decides who you must never lend to and who you must never become. Until then, guard the first cut. It was never yours to keep.